Hello everybody, it's me the Boss Hog, and we're back with another video as of our incoming costs for the month of December 2023. A few weeks late just because of Christmas and illness and busyness at work and etc. But actually it's quite an interesting month, some cool things happening, and we now have 3 months worth of data as well, so we're starting to see some early stages of trend emerging. Let's do it. Alright, so in terms of overview, honestly a pretty great month. As expected, my wife got her annual bonus, so that made a huge difference in terms of our income. It's actually even better than I was expecting. And so a couple of things here. First of all, because of an admin error as part of my wife's bonus, we're still waiting for about 2,500 to come through. Basically, my wife's bonus has three components, a very large chunk and then two smaller chunks. And one of those smaller chunks got missed. I'm not sure if it was everyone in her company, but her employer has already put their hand up and said, whoopsie. We'll fix it in January, so that'll be nice. So technically we still have another 2.5k. My only slight concern at the moment is that because the tax was less than expected, I'm sort of half expecting a catch up from the tax man in the near future, which kind of features heavily in this video honestly as well. So lots of interesting things happening with tax. But anyway, it was a pretty sweet month because that income is about double what we would typically make, so that obviously made a huge difference overall. And similarly as well, next month will be 2.5 grand higher as a result of that final amount of the bonus coming due. Regular costs are mostly as expected, and in fact, because of the money that my wife earned being slightly higher than expected, I managed to get ahead of myself in one or two areas, which together meant that our regular costs actually were about £750 higher, sort of from artificial reasons. But again, it was just me sort of prepaying some obligations for January and February, so that again felt pretty okay to be out by that much. And once you strip out the 750, their regular costs were almost bang on expectations, which was great. Other costs were a lot lower, and that's mainly because both my wife and I had a tax bill. I paid my tax bill in December, having spent about 3 months arguing over very broad ranges that HMRC were giving me. In the end, that came in at about 1.8k, so that's now fully paid up, and I am fully up to date with the tax man. My wife also has a tax bill of 4.2k. Hers is a little bit different because hers is really related to when she changed jobs and they didn't set her up on the right tax code. We kind of knew this was coming, although we're a little bit surprised by the amount. But we're now expecting to sort this in January, which she has the deadline to sort it, so we should sort that next month. But as a result of that, you can kind of see there on the cost other, they're about 4.2k lower as a result of that. There are a few other differences in here as well that we'll get to when we look at the details in each of these categories, but again, we'll get to those very shortly. But the tax difference there was material, shall we say. And then investments were a lot better as a result of not paying that tax bill, really, because we're going to pay it in January, as well as sort of better bonus and sort of one or two other things. Our investments was a lot higher than I was expecting. We mostly sort of funneled it into relatively easy access savings accounts and similar. And that's sort of a part of our debt arbitrage, but also because we're looking to build an emergency fund at the moment. We don't have one, or it's very small. It's not really fit to be called an emergency fund. And that's one of our targets for this year. So it was actually pretty sweet to get up and running so quickly. And now, our emergency fund is already up to about 10k net. Probably needs to be about 35 to 40 to sort of have truly 4 months worth of costs, which I appreciate is a big number, but it is what it is when you're again living in London and have a mortgage and a dependent and everything else. So that's the target there. Now, because of the fact that I have 3 months worth of data now, so I've been doing this for 3 months, honestly I kind of really enjoy this. I'm starting to sort of learn things, discover things in our spending that would have otherwise completely gone underneath the radar. Now I just have to do the admin of actually getting that stuff sorted. But yeah, I would say it's mostly too early to identify trends. I think I basically need another quarter to sort of look at this. I would say that the clearest trend that stood out so far is that our regular costs are about 5 grand a month. You can kind of see it if you look across the second line there, it's about 5k. My only slight concern with that is that we have a bunch of quarterly bills, primarily linked to our service charges and general flat upkeep. And the October figure was quite low because our electricity bill was sort of late landing and was much less than we were expecting anyway. But the one I'm expecting in January, effectively, I'm expecting it to be the highest of the year, as well as having service charges and also ground rent as well, which is much smaller. But still, together, those charges are going to be 2.1k, something like that. So January will be a lot higher, is my expectation that we'll get to at the end. But again, we are starting to see some trends. Cost other is not quite settled yet, and the income is also a bit variable because of everything else. However, for the rest of this video, we are going to have a look at the breakdown of each category across the 3 months. So again, we'll start to see some trends and we'll keep an eye on it as we progress and discover more about our income and costs. So let's start looking at these categories as a breakdown next. All right, perfect. So in terms of income, again, here, that most of this is going to be focused on the highlights. I've decided to highlight just to make it easier to see the things I'm talking about. Nothing unusual in my wages, or indeed my wife's wages this month, and broadly speaking, not much unusual across the month outside of my wife's bonus, which was pretty great. And again, we take those wins, especially because there's still another probably 2.5K after tax to come, so that's pretty sweet. The other thing, even though it's quite a small amount of the overall income, I've really made an effort over the last sort of 2 months to start sorting out my banking accounts. So I've sort of actively looked to reduce bank fees. So things like getting a card which covers foreign transaction fees for sort of business travel as well as sort of holidays, etc. I've also sort of moved on to a bunch of cards that offer cashback and things like that. So there was a pretty big jump. Now, this pretty big jump won't exist in all months because some of it's sort of cashback related, and as I've loaded up my credit card, that's benefited from that perspective. But again, it is nice to see the outcome of that, and I've decided sort of from January we'll also start to see some cash savings as well now that we've set up some of those accounts. So you'll start to see those numbers be populated. Something like £30 a month is my expectation there. And again, not a huge amount, but my hope for here is that overall I'll make about £500 a year in banking income and other related sort of bank rebates and interest, etc. So that'll all go into overall accounts. So even though it's not a huge amount in the scheme of things, it's still rewarding to see because there was a little bit of work, and if it does lead to sort of many hundreds of pounds every year, then that's going to be a result. Outside of that, honestly, nothing else. We had no premium bond winnings. I had no consults, no visit to the casino to either win or lose money. And likewise, very uneventful outside of those green highlights, and most of it's led by the sizable bonus there. So pretty cool to see all the same. Next up, regular costs. Okay, so here they are, and again, same principle, 3 months, etc., and the green are the highlights. So as expected here, my daughter's after-school club fees caught up in December. I'm going to blame this on sort of their admin specifically. Basically set up a direct debit, and then actually it wasn't a direct debit, so then it was a very strange piece of admin on one of their portals. Anyway, it is about the figure I was expecting. I budgeted actually 225 a month, I think is the expectation here. Now it's slightly less because even though it includes 2 months, obviously December we were away for a couple of weeks and the schools were closed for the break, etc. So that's about what I was expecting. And yeah, I consider that basically all fully caught up now. Also, the shopping here, which originally I expected to be a lot less than this, sort of a couple of £100 just for the first half of the month we were here. However, we did a very large Asda shop, and this is something we do once a quarter, give or take, but normally it's sort of in the £250 to £300 region. These are sort of things like your laundries, your soap, your dishwasher tablets, bin bags, soaps, etc. And we hadn't done one for a little while, and basically it was a very big shop. Now, to be honest with you, I quite like doing these kind of shops. Like maybe I'm a bit of a hoarder, but having a cupboard filled up with these kind of things makes me feel pretty good. And it'll be interesting to see how long these things last. Again, we didn't strictly have to do this, but it's nice when you can get a little bit ahead of yourself. We don't have a car or anything either, so some of the bulky things, like toilet roll or kitchen towels, or again heavy things like laundry, etc., is pretty fiddly if I have to carry it back. Supermarket's like 5 minute walk down the road, but it's still just sometimes easier to get it delivered en masse. So this definitely got us ahead of where we need to be on our shopping. Probably will keep us going to, I don't know, June, something like that. I mean, our cupboard is really full, and yeah, we have plenty of everything. So that feels really good. So shopping here was much higher than expected, but a good chunk of this is relating to that very big spend, so it feels fine. Also here as well, the interest payments. So from November, we're basically sitting on some cash for some people, and we've agreed that because we're sitting on it, we will pay them 4%. And what we're basically doing is putting it into account linked to our mortgage. And effectively, this gives us like a 1.2% arbitrage between, what the bank is sort of wiping off from our mortgage repayments, because again, the way that the offset mortgage works, and then they get a guaranteed 4%, etc. So it kind of works for everybody. That's the way that that's working at the moment. The way that this works is broadly £250 a month, but it's cumulative and compounding and everything else, so it gradually goes up each time. And what I did is I paid them for 3 months. So we won't have to do this again until March unless we want to. But it basically gets us ahead several months whilst we have the money. And again, about £500 ahead. We can choose to either run this several months ahead, which I think is no bad thing considering, it's a kind of informal relationship. So it's good to sort of show that we are even ahead of where we need to be. And yeah, that's that basically. Everything else here is as expected. Nothing else really to report. And the only thing I will say is that, yeah, originally I'm sort of, to be honest with you, it's partly during this video, and I sort of mentioned it to one or two people in the Discord. But originally I was looking at sort of 6 months, £5 a month. That should be sufficient for an emergency fund. But as I've started to realise that there are sort of non-regular costs, as well as quarterly costs, even as well as the sort of other stuff, I really think this needs to be more like 6k a month on average, maybe even slightly more. So I think at the moment it's like 35 to 40k would make me feel really good. Again, to be clear, we do have sort of money in ISAs and things like that we could withdraw, but I definitely don't really want to be touching that money, and it would be good to sort of have this money put aside in things like premium bonds, those kind of instant access accounts that can still work reasonably well. And yeah, that's the target at the moment. We're currently up to about 10 as a net figure, so we're moving in the right direction. But again, it's been boosted by the income from my wife's bonus. So, but I do feel like regular costs are starting to be quite well understood now, and feel pretty good about these. So yeah, and to the point that we were able to get a couple of months ahead with some of these items also feels very good as well. So. But now it starts to deteriorate from this point, so let's do the non-regular cost next. Okay, so the big green here is going to be the HMR repay. This is actually a tax bill from 2 to 3 years ago. Now, I didn't realise that when you earn 6 figures in the UK, you have to do self-assessment. I didn't know anyone who'd earned that, or at least not to the level that we discussed those kind of things. And it's not something that gets, well, at least for me, it was never something that got communicated to me was something I needed to do. Last year, I actually didn't earn above that because I was changing jobs and didn't get a bonus, didn't qualify for one. Etc. So, but this is sort of from 2 and 3 years ago, so there was a bit of a catch up. Not a ton of things missing. I also had £300 fees as part of this as well, which was a whoopsie. But anyway, that's all sorted now and brought back up to date. And yes, as a reminder for anyone watching, in the UK, if you earn more than 100k, you have to fill in your own self-assessment tax, even if you're fully going through the pay-as-you-earn system, which again was news to me. And I'm not sure whether that's because I'm oblivious to things or which probably is true. But just in case anyone else wasn't aware of that, so worth pointing that out. But again, it's good to be on top with the taxman. Now, originally, to be fair, I expected to cover this sort of and pay it back over a 12-month period, £150. But because of the fact that I have my credit card, it's got like a 13 grand limit on, I decided I'd rather owe the bank rather than the taxman, and it basically operates in exactly the same way. So I decided to just pay it all off in one go. And yeah, resolve issues with the taxman and feel good about that, which does feel good, by the way, about that. I would also say that my family holiday over the festive period, which I had with my daughter and wife to my in-laws in Poland, was much higher than I was expecting. Although this figure does include everything, including sort of trains to the airport and sort of some shopping trips that we did for them while we were out there and those kind of things. Still a bit surprised at this kind of cost. Poland has definitely seen pretty significant inflation, and everything out there does seem more expensive. So I guess that's worth highlighting. But still, I was a bit surprised at this kind of figure. It is what it is. Eating out was also more than I was expecting, considering we were really only here for half the month. And again, any eating out my wife and I did in Poland was grouped into family holidays rather than eating out. So this is legitimate eating out sort of between the 1st and the 19th of December. So yeah, pretty steep. It's definitely an area for improvement for my wife and I. We did each have like one evening out with our sort of friends, but still this is pretty steep. And again, it's probably an area for improvement. I'm not 100%, maybe it is a reasonable, it's about 5% a month, right, in terms of our income. So maybe it's a perfectly acceptable way to spend 5%. But to be fair, it's again a bit eye-opening and eye-watering because I just expected it to be less than it actually is. Similarly as well, presents gifts are much higher than I would have expected. Although it's kind of chunky in isolation, a birthday here or a visit there, it's like, it seems pretty constant. Now, in fairness, for Christmas, like I don't have the biggest family, but still we did, sort of sisters and aunts and that kind of stuff. Also, as well, a good chunk of this is my wife getting overexcited and prepared for my daughter's birthday in January. So a couple of £100 there as well as related to that. Originally, my daughter's birthday had a budget of like £200, and my wife has been my wife, which is very passionate and enthusiastic and sort of creative, so it has definitely bloomed. I did think about updating my sort of budget expectations for this, but instead I'm just gonna let my wife have some fun. You know, she just got a big fat bonus. She deserves a little bit of freedom. And then at the end, I'll be like, wifey, you know, that £200 budget we agreed, well, it's about 4 times that, I think, is currently what it's going to run at. So we'll have a little bit of a laugh about it. If we were sort of, you know, struggling or we weren't hitting our financial targets, I'd be a lot more grumpy and sort of flag it. But again, we should, you know, the purpose of this, I sort of want to be clear, isn't to reduce every non-recurring charge down to zero and, you know, stop going out and anything like that. It's to basically say like, are we comfortable with this? Is this how we want to spend our money? And if it is, then that's okay. And again, we're hitting our targets, so I'm sort of don't want to make it overly burdensome. But at the same time, I think it's sort of, you know, we should try and hit our budgets. That's what kind of what budgets are for. And last up is my wife's HMRC. And again, we were going to do something very similar with her HMRC, where we spread it over 12 months. But instead, we're just going to put it on the credit card at 0%. Now, hers is slightly different, actually, when she changed to her newest job. Her employer is American, and they're still kind of getting to grips with one or two aspects about UK law, frankly. And they messed up. And to be fair, I remember when she first started there, like she was earning so well, and we were like, they're definitely not taxing us, right? And instead of sort of putting you onto emergency tax code, which is what's meant to happen in the UK, they didn't seem to put her on any tax code at all. And or whatever they did do, it just wasn't the correct one. So we were kind of expecting this. We knew it was going to catch up sooner or later, and then sure enough, it did. I think originally we were expecting a figure like 3.5, 3.6. But again, my wife's got access to the government gateway and has checked everything, and I think this is going to be something we do over the next few days, so that it lands by the end of January, and we can put that behind us, and we'll both be up to date fully with the tax man, basically. So yeah, a few surprises here. I was quite surprised by the grooming and clothes. And honestly, I'm now groomed, but that was in January. But this was my wife did like a makeup top up, which is, my wife doesn't wear a ton of makeup or anything, but there was like £110 boots bill, which was quite expensive. And I was like, wifey, what's that? And she's like, that's my yearly supply of these 4 makeup items. So I was like, okay, fine. So that to me as well was an eye-opening experience as a man. But again, it is what it is. So actually, there wasn't really anything in terms of clothes or other grooming, traditional grooming. It was just sort of all focused on that kind of stuff. So everything else here is normal. I must admit, the Adapted Minds, which is sort of a fun little kids program, every time I see this, I really need to get it sorted. It's just so small, and I've been so busy. But every time I do these videos, I'm like, God damn it, I really need to sort that out with my bank. And get that sorted. So that is also a work in progress that I haven't yet got around to. But so a few surprises in here for sure, and a few things that sort of, if I'd have stripped them out, it would have been a lot better. And again, it's December, we were away, we didn't really watch our budget, so maybe it's expected. But we'll see again how this develops over the next 3 months, and see whether we are just spending sort of £400 a month on average on presents. Maybe that is the going rate. We will see. But let's move on to the fun stuff now of our investments. All right, so in terms of investments, well, I guess it's kind of interesting. We'll start with the boring stuff, which is we added 2,800 into our ISA. That's expected. The reason for that specific figure is that December to March, so 4 months, 2,800 each month will max out my wife's ISA. My ISA is already maxed out as of about September, so that's our most important financial target, I would say, is maxing out our ISAs each year, so 40k in total. And that's really because we want to retire a little bit early, so before we have access to our private pensions. So, but realistically, you know, by the time we get to retire, I expect our ISAs to account for about 50% of our overall wealth, and private pensions something like 35 to 40%. So they're both pretty material contributors to our retirement. The difference, of course, for anyone who's UK based, is the ISA is not taxable at time of use in the future, and that will also have a very significant impact on what should be a pretty fat retirement. So again, important we hit that, but so far so good on that figure. In terms of premium bonds here, I was really pleased with this kind of figure being able to hit it at 3k. We now have sort of 6.5k in our premium bonds, so that will start to qualify from February. And hopefully I might actually win something. So although my odds still aren't particularly great of winning any prize, I think I've got like a 1 in 4 chance of winning at these kind of levels. So we will see. Obviously, you hope for the big one. But it's just a kind of pretty fun lottery, really. So we'll see how that goes. And again, this is partly because of the fact we've been loading up my credit card. For anyone who's sort of new, I got a credit card 2 months ago with a sort of 13K credit limit on, which was a pleasant surprise. And it's 0% for like 15 months. So I've just been transferring everything onto it, loading it up, and then basically an agreement I have with my wife is that we should always have enough liquid cash to cover that. So this is something I keep an eye on. And currently we have sort of 15K in assets and 6K on the credit card. So going very nicely. And this is my sort of 10K I mentioned earlier in terms of our emergency fund. The net is the start of that emergency fund. And eventually I expect our emergency fund to be sitting almost entirely in premium bonds, because the rest of it currently is in a savings account with Santander, as well as in our mortgage offset account, which we'll get to in just a second. But over time, I sort of expect the offset to not be needed anymore as interest rates hopefully return to normal, and the cash saving may or may not be there, but it won't be the majority of our emergency fund. Is going to probably sit in premium bonds, right? Not exposed to the market, guaranteed safety, and an okay rate of return considering the value of the instant access cash that it is. And then outside of that, so cash savings 8.7K, really good. Like I say, this is the start of our emergency fund, almost a month early in effect. So that was the big win and the happiness for me. I did sort of do a bit of account reorganization. So I've had a Santander 123 account for 10 years, and it's gradually gotten worse, especially over the last few years in terms of the benefits. And Sant had a Edge account, which specifically for 7% Edge Saver it was called. And I realized I could just get myself an Edge current account. It was all very painless, sort of took me 10 minutes tops to transfer everything over. And then what it meant is that I not only got better sort of terms on my current account, but I also could qualify for this 7% savings account. Now it's capped at 4K, so it's not the biggest ever, but still it's 7%, and that is guaranteed, and it gets paid monthly. So that's going to start hitting my account toward the end of January. And then the rest went into my mortgage offset account, which my mortgage at the moment is 5.22%, pretty ugly. But at least I sort of have some offset in there to sort of reduce the bill. And again, for anyone who's new to following me, I choose not to reduce the bill. I still pay £2,200 a month and basically overpay my mortgage. But that's always an option. Like if money was tight, or one of us lost our job, our mortgage payment is only 1.9K. The other 300 is basically the overpayment that we're choosing to make. So we're basically, it was a really good month, even if one or two of the costs were higher than I was expecting. Overall, like, I'm really pleased about the regularity of the regular costs, which I know is silly to say because of course that's what regular costs should be. They're meant to be regular, but this is all very new to me. And again, until sort of 6 to 9 months ago, I had no idea about my costs. And then as of about 3 months ago, we started to do everything into sort of into a report that we basically use to present this video. So it feels quite good, to be honest. Very happy with how December shaped out. And I'm just going to round off with terms of what my expectations are for January. Okay, so in terms of those expectations, I still expect income to be higher than normal. Across 2023, our average monthly income was more or less 10K on the dot, so 120K. So this obviously is a lot higher, and this is a combination of that 2.5K that I mentioned, as well as a promotion and salary increase for my wife. Two promotions technically. So she will start to receive that new salary in January and be added to that as well. So my wife's basically crushing it at work from what I can tell, although it has been extremely busy for a good 3 months in order to secure those things. So I think it feels pretty good overall. In terms of our regular costs, I do expect this to be really high. Basically, our highest month is going to be January and June, which is when all three of the quarterly bills kind of align. Ground rent is twice a year. But January tends to be the most expensive because not only does it have all the quarterly / twice a year bills, but it also is our winter catch up and then winter forward bill as well. So it tends to be really painful. So I'm expecting just over 2K between those three charges, and that basically is what's driving the regular increases there. I will also say as well that the spring term, which I think is what this term counts as at school, is the most expensive term. So the way that the charging works in my daughter's schools basically means that charge goes up about £100 a month as well. and one or two other things as well. And to be fair, this is partly why I wanted to get a little bit ahead of myself in terms of the interest payments, right, that we spoke about, because that's always an option as well that we can scale back if we need to. Then in terms of the other costs here, so I mean, of this 4,400, sort of more than 90% of it is for my wife's HMRC bill. So it's technically like 4150, something like that. And then the rest is sort of just due to gifts and presents, and by that it includes the birthday party and organising that kind of stuff as well. So this is almost all going to go there. And again, I'm very much expecting us to not hit this budget target, just because, again, I know my wife. So we will we'll see what we end up with, but I expect our other costs to be a little bit higher than this. Also, as well, like me and my wife again both went out at least one day in January to date, so that will have an impact as well here. So actually, I think my cost budget here may well be quite far off, but we will see. In terms of investments, so this covers all of them. And again, I'm expecting to have at least £500 in premium bonds. I might be able to do 1,000 next month. I don't think I'll be able to do more than that. But we will basically, investments is where everything else goes. Now, in fairness, you might see the deficit there and be like, well, Liam, you're going to get ruined. But there's a few things to consider. So first of all, the 4.2k tax repayment. That's going on the credit card, right? So even though the costs are kind of there, there's no cash leaving our account at this moment in time. So all that will be happening is I will be putting 4.2k into those accounts, right? And that may well be premium bonds or etc. And we'll cover it from that perspective. So the actuals here, obviously, we will have those costs that will kind of arrive and be due, but then we will defer them into the future when the cash will actually, leave our account in 12 months' time when that comes due. So even though this deficit looks quite negative, that's fine. I'm not worried about it at all for the reasons that I just mentioned. Now, in fairness, after January, that will more or less be our credit card maxed out. Not entirely, it'll be about 12,000, but I kind of wanted to leave, the rest as a cushion in case I forget anything that I've linked to it, that kind of stuff. So we're going to leave it there at that kind of level and then sort of put it in a drawer somewhere and forget about it for 12 months. So everything after January will return to relative normality, and we'll have a new year from there. So that's the plan for January. But again, I think the income and cost regular will be about the right ballpark. Cost other, we will see, and then investments again might look a little bit different, just because I actually kind of expect to add a bit more than that to investments, just because of the money that we won't actually be paying to HMRC, right? The bank will be paying HMRC and giving us a debt to pay back in no more than 12 months as a result. So that's my expectations for January. Let's see next month how we do. Thank you very much for everyone who's followed this video to this point. I personally get a lot of value from these videos, so if anyone else does, then that's just a double benefit. If not, then I'm still benefiting anyway, and it's my channel, so that's all good. But thank you very much, honestly, for everyone who's watched. I've been the Boss Hog, and good luck with everything. Bye for now.